must be buzzing. Aston Villa back in the Champions League for the first time, the major European tournament for the first time since 1982, which is a long old time.
I mean, I wasn't born, so that's how long ago it was.
I wasn't born either. No. There you go. So none of us have seen this before. Aston Villa in Europe's premier competition. When that draw was taking place yesterday, how were you feeling? Because I always think it's quite difficult as a fan because on the one hand, you want the favourable draw. You want the draw that gives you the greatest chance of progressing. But the occasion of somebody like Bayern Munich coming to Villa Park, that's what being in this competition is all about, right?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I was actually, before the draw took place, sitting there thinking, I want as many good teams as possible because this might not ever happen again. I think it probably will with Emery, but it might not ever happen again. So I want to see some elite teams coming to Villa Park. I mean, I will see that with Bayern Munich and Juventus coming there. I guess I'll have to wait for the knockouts for the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona, but I'm happy to do that, Harry. But it's just exciting, isn't it? You know, Villa playing Bayern Munich in the Premier Continental competition. That's something that 6 years ago, when Villa was struggling to get out of the Championship, it just didn't seem like it was anything that was ever going to happen. Even a couple of years ago, before Emery came in, Villa was stinking out of the place under Steven Gerrard. A lot of these players were playing under Steven Gerrard. What Unai Emery and the people at this football club have done is just absolutely remarkable.
Everybody looks at Aston Villa from an outside perspective, I think, and probably fears that they might have a bit of the Newcastles in that all of a sudden you're in Europe's premier competition. You can't really rotate like you did in the Conference League last year, for example, and people maybe worry about how you balance domestic football and European football, particularly this season of all seasons where there's even more Champions League games in the early stages. Do you worry about that? Or do you think that Villa are better equipped than Newcastle were when they went into the competition?
I think Villa are better equipped, and there's a few reasons why I think that. One is the manager. Obviously, we know what Unai Emery can do in European competition. I love Eddie Howe. He's a brilliant manager, but he'd never managed in Europe before, so it was a new experience for him and a new experience for a lot of the players at Newcastle as well to be in Europe. I think last season in the Conference League will have done Villa good because they've experienced having that load of Premier League football and needing to win every game to get something in the Premier League.
But is it the same load though, Dan? Because you can change 5, 6, 7 players in the conference and still get away with it. You won't be able to do that in the Champions League.
We didn't really do that, and towards the end of the season we couldn't do it because we had so many injuries. We literally couldn't change the team round. But I think the players, again, a lot of Villa players have played in Europe until last season. I think getting that under their belt last season is a positive thing. I think the new format will help. I think Villa have got a great chance of progressing to the last 16 with the way this new format is. They've got to finish in the top 24 teams, which I would back them to do.
It's a lot of games to eliminate very few teams, isn't it, in my opinion?
Yeah, it is. But for us, we've never been in Europe before, and we've never been in the Champions League before. And these players, a lot of them have never played in the Champions League before, so they're going to embrace and enjoy every single moment. And there's just going to be some brilliant games, particularly at Villa Park. I'm not scared by anyone in the Champions League. Villa showed last season in one-off ties, in one-off games, that they can beat the best. They beat Manchester City and Arsenal in the same week. And there's not many teams in Europe that are better than those two teams, in my opinion. So I see nothing that really worries me with the Champions League. I think Villa fans are of the mind that they're just going to enjoy every single second because it may not happen again. And it's just going to be something that we could have only dreamed of a few years ago.
Yeah, they should absolutely embrace it and enjoy every moment of it because it is special. I mean, even for me as an Arsenal fan, we were out of it for a number of years. But when we went back to the Emirates last season and that Champions League anthem was playing, you just got right back into it.
Changed the anthem, haven't they? I can't believe it.
Slightly. But
I didn't hear it yesterday.
It's ever so slightly.
I love that anthem. They better not. It would be typical if they murdered it just as Villa get in the Champions League.
Yeah. What did you make of the new draw process? Cristiano Ronaldo pressing the magic button with his very expensive watch on his wrist.
Yeah. But They've tried to revamp it, haven't they? They've tried to do something a little bit different. I'm not against the format. I actually think it's a decent format. Maybe the old format was a little bit tired. I quite like that you're playing 8 different teams. That's a good experience. I think, and like I say, I think Villa have got a good chance of progressing. But the draws are long, aren't they? I've watched them previously. They make them a lot longer than they need to be normally. But in fairness, this new format, maybe it did need to be a little bit longer this time round.
Yeah, and it was computerised as well, wasn't it? So there's not too many people complaining about anything. Well, you just can't, can you? Because we don't know how that all works behind the scenes. I just want to ask you about the season. I know we're just a couple of weeks into it, but what does a successful campaign look like for Aston Villa? Do you need to finish in the top 4 again to say success? Do you need to get to the knockout stages of the Champions League? What would be your trigger points to say, yes, this is a successful or unsuccessful campaign?
Champions League, I'd like to get to the knockouts, and as I've said a couple of times already, I think Villa will get to the knockouts. I think Emery's taken Villarreal to the knockouts of the Champions League. I would back him to do
a
this.
semi-final.
Exactly. I would back him to get Villa to the knockouts as well. Premier League will be a little bit tougher this time round. It's so early on in the season that we don't really know what Villa look like fully yet. You never get a true sense of all the teams until the window's shut anyway. But Chelsea were brilliant last week but could quite easily be rubbish this week. I do think Newcastle will be better this season. I'm not really sure what to expect of Spurs, and I think the top 3 is done. Manchester United the same as Chelsea, really. I'm not really sure how it's going to go. I think the top 3 is the top 3. After that, I think Villa can finish anywhere from 4th to 7th. I've got them down as being 5th and hopeful that that's enough to get Champions League qualification again if the coefficient is kind.
We were both at Villa Park last weekend, and I think it's fair to say that one of the standout players, if not the standout player of the game, was Morgan Rogers.
Oh,
I mean, that was the first time. Did he play against Arsenal last season? I can't actually remember.
He did.
He start the game?
He started, yeah.
He started the game. This was the first time that I looked at Morgan Rogers, and admittedly, I don't watch Villa every week, and I went, wow, this guy's a handful. How far can he go in the game, do you think?
I think he'll have played for England by the end of the season. I think, again, it just shows what a brilliant coach Emery is and what a brilliant team he has around him. Because when Rodgers was signed in January, he probably got thrust into action a little bit sooner than Villa planned because we had injuries.
Yeah.
And attacking-wise, you could see he had ability, but on the defensive side of things, he wasn't quite attuned to what Emery wanted, and it took him a few months to get up to speed. But when he got up to speed with what Emery wants and what Emery demands, he started to fly, and he started to add goals and assists at the back end of last season. Then he got injured and missed the last few games. They've tweaked his role a little bit now, which I think suits him. I think one of the reasons they were prepared to let Moussa Diaby go is because they earmarked that Morgan Rogers would probably be more effective in that number 10 role, and they couldn't afford to keep Diaby there, not first choice on the wages he was on. He was brilliant against Arsenal. I don't think it's a stretch to say he was the best player on the pitch.
I think that's fair.
In that game, I know Villa lost, but I do think he was the best player on the pitch.
Do you know what it was for me? I don't know enough about him to be able to make a real assessment of where his strengths and weaknesses are. But it was clear to me that on a physical level, he was just so far in front of everybody. Now, I know I sound like I'm being a bit of a bitter Arsenal fan here, but I do think Declan Rice isn't quite at it at the moment. I do think Thomas Partey, his fitness isn't quite there at the moment. But that shouldn't take anything away from how physically dominant Morgan Rogers was on that day. And if you can do it against those two, then you can do it against pretty much anybody.
He's so unique because essentially he's a wide player. Villa obviously playing him as a number 10 at the moment. But how many wide players are 6'3", 6'4"? He's not particularly stocky, but he's so difficult to get the ball off because of his size and because of his frame. So he's just a really, really unique footballer, not someone you really see. I can't think of another player in the Premier League at the moment to compare him to. So I think he's got a really, really unique skill set.
Do you know who he reminded me of? And I know this is really high praise.
Jonah Lomu, like Jamie Redknapp said.
No. Yaya Toure.
Yeah, that's probably
That's
decent.
what I saw for 90 minutes, or however long he played at Villa the other week.
He's got different facets of a few different players. There's in that number 10 position, he has got elements of Bellingham's game as well, but he's a bit quicker and better with the ball at his feet than Bellingham. I think he'll add goals to his game as the season goes on. He hasn't scored yet this season, but I think he'll get into double figures for Villa and he'll get better as the season goes on. He's just a really, really exciting talent, and fair play to Villa for identifying him. And it was actually... He was a pure Unai Emery signing. I know Villa have got Monchi at the club and various other transfer specialists, but Emery pushed to get him. He'd seen something of Morgan Rogers at Middlesbrough in the Championship after 6 months. A lot of people raised eyebrows at Villa paying somewhere around £15 million for him. He's worth a hell of a lot more than that already.
We've only got a few hours of the transfer window remaining. I'm not sure that Villa are going to do anything. It doesn't look like they are. But is there anything that they need, in your opinion? Would you want one more to come in? And if so, who and maybe where?
They were looking at João Felix, but I think what Emery's shown is that if he's not the right player that he wants, he won't be panicked into buying anyone just to fill squad space or just for the sake of it. So I quite like that from him, that he's prepared to coach what's already there. And that's what he's done with Villa. He's made every player at the football club better than when he arrived at Villa Park. They're one short in defence, I think. A centre-back that could play right-back would have been a real plus. If there was any way they could get Trevor Chalobah in. You know, it's clear he's not going to be doing anything for Chelsea. Maybe offer a portion of his wages and pay a small loan fee. If they could do that, I think that would really, really bolster them, because they wanted Gertrude from Feyenoord, who would have been a really, really smart pickup, but an expensive pickup. And teams are still worried about PSR, and Villa are one of those teams, and they just haven't managed to get the finances to get him in. He would have been a great signing because he can play right back, but as a right back, he can tuck in and make a back three. He can drop into midfield if he needs to. He can push on and overlap and play like a traditional wing back. He would have given Villa a bit more tactical flexibility. Tactically, he's a very, very switched on and intelligent player, but that's not going to happen. Looks like he's going to Leipzig. But if they could get someone who could play right back / centre back, that would have really helped. But the word is that Villa aren't going to do anything. There's going to be no incomings, and that was the word from pretty early on this morning.
Yeah, it looks like their business is done.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.